I'm Jennifer Walker, Genuine Social, and I'm here today with Dr. Tim. Oh, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name.
Pychyl, like Mitchell.
Pychyl.
It's an odd spelling, so I don't blame you for stumbling on it.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? Because most people say Pychyl or Pychyl, but it's Pychyl.
Yeah. Well, here's the genuine moment where I'm like, I actually forgot to ask you how to pronounce it.
Everyone has to ask.
Dr. Pychyl. And he's agreed to talk to me today a little bit about procrastination. Something that we struggle with a lot as people in general, but especially entrepreneurs. So I wanted to ask you sort of what led you into a study about procrastination?
Well, I didn't actually start out studying procrastination at all. I was doing a doctoral dissertation. Well, I'd done my graduate work on something called personal projects. Personal projects are the things we're trying to do in our lives. And they can be anything from getting my business going to stop biting my nails, to worry less. Like, all these things are projects in our lives, right? And when you put that together, you get a really good picture of a human being. So I found it a very powerful way to do this kind of research. And it was the work of Brian Little, who's at Oxford now, but was at Carleton at the time. And so I got studying people's personal projects, and I was interviewing Ph.D. students, in fact. I was interviewing Ph.D. students from across campus. And what I realized is that if I wanted to understand their well-being, how they were feeling about life, I needed to understand the projects they said they were going to do and didn't do, not the projects they were engaged in, which fascinated me. And for the people who were procrastinating, and that word came up over and over again, their well-being was in the toilet. And so when I finished that doctoral work on personal projects and how it predicted well-being, I remember my external examiner said, "So what's next, Tim?" And I said, "I'm going to stop studying what people are doing and start studying what people say they're going to do and don't." And I'd never look back because, in such a profound way, we become our own worst enemy. And I find that so psychologically important to get at. What's happening here? Why do we do this to ourselves? And I've met, I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I've met people from around the world who ask themselves that same question.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this to myself, right?
Why?
Yeah. And so that's how I got started. I came at it from studying people's goals, then realized we don't pursue all our goals the way we think we're going to. They break down. We call it volition or willful action, volitional action. Why does our volitional action break down? And that fascinates me.
Yeah, it's so true in all worlds. But as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneur worlds, we're all about goal setting. Goal setting. And it is important to goal set, but the follow through can suffer so greatly.
Yes. And then we'll have to get into that because everyone has goals. I think in some ways that's what defines human beings. We have long range plans and goals. We're social beings, and we're also goal oriented. And yet we are, as the behavioral economists will tell us, predictably irrational. So as much as it seems so rational to have goals, at the same time there's things about the way the human brain works that are predictably irrational. And that's important to understand. It's not that we're just irrational in ways that we don't understand. In fact, we know a lot about this irrationality that once you get on the inside of, it can help you understand your own behavior. So that's why I was interested in talking to you.
Yeah, well, and I thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me. So I read the book.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to put it up here. In case you're interested, Solving the Procrastination Puzzle, a concise guide to strategies for change. Look how short it is.
Yes, I'm glad you did that. Yeah.
You guys, skinny, thin, fantastic read. It didn't take me long to do, except I took the time to do all of the exercises. So I did all the exercises, and that took a little bit more of the time.
But you could read it cover to cover
in a couple
hours.
Yeah, you could be done. But I would hope, and I think you would hope as well, that everyone should stop and actually take the time to do the exercises because they can be very enlightening.
Yes, but I think sometimes it's good just to get through it once.
Okay.
And that's why I wrote it short. In fact, the best compliment I got paid, and I'm glad you went there, is that a person who's an entrepreneur, I won't say who because it would identify him, and because he's related, and then a lawyer friend of mine, a very high, powerful lawyer. They both said to me, "That's the first book I've read in years," and both of them have learning disabilities. And I thought, perfect. I mean, that's just what I was shooting for, because there's nothing more ironic than a thick book about procrastination.
Yeah.
Because the truth of it too is that you'll spend your time reading about procrastination as opposed to addressing it. And you don't need that much background.
Yeah, no, I really thought that was great. And even my husband, when I picked it up and I showed him, I'm like, you can do this. You can do this.
Yeah, good.
It's not that long.
I'm so pleased.
Yeah, it was really great. It was very enlightening. And I look forward to seeing what my husband has to say about it too. Yeah. But one of the first quotes that jumped out at me from the book was, all procrastination is delay, but not all delay is procrastination.
I got to tell your listeners that we didn't set this up.
This is totally off the cuff. You guys know me. It's totally off the cuff.
Because that is a very powerful place to start.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you grabbed onto that too. Delay is part of our lives. We could have delayed today, for example. You have a 3-year-old, I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. There's flu going around. It would have been very easy to have what I would call an inevitable delay. There's purposeful delay. You may have had something come up where maybe you had another opportunity that if you didn't take today, you wouldn't get. And so you would have said, Tim, could we do this? And I'd say, sure, because I'm really flexible right now. So there's some purposeful delay. There's all sorts of delay. In fact, you said we're goal-oriented, we are, but to be a rational agent, you have to realize some things have to wait while I do other things. And that's the best of all worlds, because then you know, not only am I goal setting, but I'm priority setting. So procrastination is delay, but not all delay is procrastination. And what's the message here is that you're going to have delay in your life, and don't beat yourself up for every bit of delay. I know lots of hardworking people who come home and go, oh, I still haven't put that laundry away, or I said I was going to paint that wall. Now they are goals, and some of them are longer term, like painting, and some of them are short term, like because I'm doing laundry right now. It's a constant, right? But we can, if we only have one word for delay, which is procrastination, and the problem is so many people do have just that one word, then you end up wearing this burden of guilt, and you feel like a bad person. So lots of forms of delay, even delay due to mental health. There are times in our lives when it all hits the fan. You lose someone that you love. You're recovering from something, and you have to recognize that I'm not going to be running on all cylinders, and some things are going to have to wait, but I don't have to feel badly about that. Now, that part of delay that is procrastination, I hope you do feel badly about it, because that, honestly, because it's one of the things that will twig you towards wanting to change and making a commitment to change, because change isn't going to be easy. But that's a great place to start. That there are many forms of delay, and we could even get into arousal delay. Like some people, but there are very few, and you're probably not one of them, that puts things off because it feels so good to work at the last minute. Now a bunch of people are jumping up there and say, that's me. Probably not actually. You have to be so emotionally stable to do that. Because to work at the last minute, we know that last minute efforts usually are poor, and then you should know that too, that we don't work better under pressure. We always make more mistakes under pressure. We don't have time for revision, for example, or whatever it is, second thoughts even. So we make more mistakes. We only work under pressure sometimes because we have to have a fire lit under our butt to get us going. But arousal delay is there, and some people will rely on that. But I've given a lot of public talks, and that quickly dissipates because people realize, that's not really me.
Yeah, I do have a few people in my circle that are like, oh yeah, I work best under pressure, and I thought that for a while where I was like, yeah, I work best under pressure, and then I realized it was just not delay, it was legit procrastination, where I was just pushing myself, and then I never actually felt good about what I was submitting, what I was doing, and so that sort of faded away. I'd say even more recently, just in maybe the past 8 years or so, even for myself. It was a total university thing. I was like, I work so well under pressure.
Yeah, that's it. Well, school is such an unnatural act. That's a good place to start too, that, we spend our lives in school, and in school we have all these things we don't want to do and don't matter to us, but we have to do. And so it's almost sane to put it off to the last minute and just squeak through, go good enough, right? But the most pathos that I see, I was careful not to say the most pathetic people I meet, but the most pathos I see in people's lives. And I got an email just the other day, one just this morning, in fact, where someone said, I want to join your network because even when I was in school, I'd rather sharpen pencils than work. Like, these are habits we learn early in life. And then we get into the work world, and it doesn't pay. Last minute efforts, actually, clients see that right away.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And you can just taste it. And so that's the last thing you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely can understand that in terms of school, although I did enjoy school for the most part. But there were some courses where I just, anything math. Anything math. Even when it was like the chips were down and I needed to do that effort, I would do that effort, but it was so last minute that at that point, at that point, it didn't matter how strong I tried. It was just...
Because it's one of those things you need a foundation for too. But that's interesting too, because there'll be other people listening and say, oh, well, no, math is what I didn't procrastinate on, because there's a right and wrong answer with math. And I know if I got it right. It was all other stuff where I really didn't know if I understood it. So again, for everyone here, we're all going to have different points in our lives where it comes off the rail. Some people maybe never procrastinate around their business life, but their relationships are falling apart because of the procrastination. It's the home stuff that's not getting done. So we can speak to both of that. I hope that can be the end of an entrepreneurial's career, but it can also be the end of an entrepreneur's relationships if we don't have that balance there.
I actually was speaking with someone who gave a talk for a network that I'm a part of, and she was talking about those sort of aspects of the life, the business, the personal, as being more of a work-life integration.
Yes, not a balance.
How do you integrate them versus balance? And that was something that for a long time I felt, oh, balance, and I was so stuck on trying to find the balance. And it was just this aha moment of like, no, it's not about balancing, because you'll never really, unless you have a brief, glorious, shining moment of balance one day.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and you'll see a lot of that written about right now. We're sitting here in the beginning of 2020, because these things live forever, it seems, so you have to timestamp it somehow. But that, yes, there's lots being written about that, the myth of that. In fact, I have a very good friend, a super successful academic who's retired now. He's a super successful sculptor, and he would say, nothing in life is really in balance. Nature abhors balance. That you need to be off balance to grow. And so we have to be careful with that language. And I'm glad you called me on it. It's not so much that I expect you to have a balance between a home life and your entrepreneurial life. It's that it may be that your procrastination is in your entrepreneurial life, but you're neglecting to do things in the other part of your life that do need to get done.
Absolutely. And I think especially, and you touch a little bit on this near the end of the book, in terms of social media. You guys, I love social media, but there's a lot of negative things that can come out of social media, one of which is that appearance of other people having the balance.
Or the perfect life.
The perfect life. You're watching someone like, oh, they're doing so well, when really it's their highlight reel.
Yeah, of course.
And then you can spend a lot of time emotionally invested in comparing yourself and using it as a means of procrastination.
It immobilizes you, because what happens often is that many of us, because of the world we live in, we're quite perfectionistic. And there's a certain flavor of perfectionism that's related to procrastination, and that's called socially prescribed perfectionism. That means that you're trying to live up to the standards of others. And if social media has done anything, it's put other people in our face constantly for comparisons purposes. And social comparison is quite a natural process, but it can be debilitating if you're always trying to live up to those highlight reels, as you say. And that's what we're even getting shorter with Instagram and other types of media. And we won't name them all because there'll be others by the time you're watching this. But it becomes then, what's the point of starting? I can't live up to that. And it immobilizes. So yeah, it's terribly problematic. And you know it's a problem for you. We do use social media. I'm hoping that you're using this and it's something that's giving something to you. But you're going to end this and perhaps make a new goal. But with many times where we're having a problem with social media, we wonder, why is it I got here? It's 3 hours ago that I started, and I'm watching a seal hit a kayaker in the face with an octopus, and I wasn't looking for this, right? And so then you realize I'm sort of, it's called desultory behavior. You're just wandering, and there's no purpose to it. Now, it doesn't mean we don't ever want to take a break. We all need to take breaks. But we all know in our own lives when we're binging and we're lost. And that feeds into procrastination. In fact, a study we did 20 years ago now. 20 full years ago. This is before Web 0.20, before any of the phones. I was still carrying a bag phone. I was a really early adopter.
A bag
Yeah,
phone?
well, it looked like a regular telephone set with a great big battery. It was, you had to carry it in a bag. You could never put it in your pocket. Yeah, I guess, yeah, they were huge. First cell phones were huge. Anyhow,
Wow.
just to say that no one was using this technology. And we found that 50% of the time people were online, they were procrastinating. And that's before these sorts of sticky tools, and before Netflix, and before social media.
And push notifications.
That's right. This is just that you could sit down at a computer. So we know that this is a powerful technology for problematic behavior, not just for efficiency. Yeah.
So then, knowing all of this stuff about how we have the push notifications, we have all of those, that sticky tech as you're calling it, what would be sort of the one thing, and I know you have a couple of different things that you talk about in your book, but what would be sort of the number one thing for entrepreneurs specifically that you would say, this is where you should focus, at least to start?
That's a tough one, because we're all a little different. But there's no doubt in my mind, and it would speak even to your notion of balance becomes a bit of a myth. And what else have we seen over the last decade even of a myth is this notion of multitasking, right? We all have goals, and there are many goals, but we don't work on all of them at the same time. But somehow we legitimize our off-task behavior by we're saying we're multitasking, but meanwhile we're distracting ourselves. Or as Neil Postman would say, we're amusing ourselves to death. So my point is, and this is the hard point, is you have to shut it off at times. And I meet some very highly productive people who write about this stuff and practice it. And you'll see, when you send them an email, for example, they'll say, I only check my email once a day. Now that might work for you. It doesn't work for me. I happen to like to stay on top of my email. But you have to protect certain periods of time from that because, again, cognitive psychologists have shown us that when you move from your attention from what you're working on, let's say it's a business proposal, and then over to some mundane email, it takes a lot of time to come back into that headspace. So if you're doing something as serious as work for a client or a business proposal or things that take real thought, you need to shut the other stuff off for a while. Say that this hour is sacrosanct. I won't let it be interrupted. That's not easy, but
No.
we have to protect that time. We have to get rid of those distractions, and there's different ways you can do that. And you'll be able to find all sorts of productivity people who will provide these solutions, including you can get apps on your phone that will shut your phone down if you want to turn that over to your app. Yeah.
I think one of the big mindsets that feeds into the outcome of multitasking, of trying to do something and checking your email or answering your phone, is this whole other notion of a scarcity mindset, especially in business owners. So I'm going to pick on the real estate agents because I worked with a lot of you guys. And you're doing your things, and then as soon as the phone rings, there's I need to answer this. I need to answer it because it's my client, because I need to. And working on the business will suffer because you're working in the business multitasking.
Right. And these are tough choices. And that's what wisdom is knowing the difference. There are times when you need to take a call. But there's other times when you're taking the call because deep down inside, and when we need to move here, there's a little piece of you, and it's quite non-conscious, that is a little bit uncertain, or a lot uncertain, and maybe a bit afraid, or frustrated, or bored. And this is the key story here. For many of you thinking about procrastination, you think it's a time management problem. And in some ways we've set it up as that because we've talked about goals so far, or protecting time from distractions. But that's not the story of procrastination at all. So we started by saying that all procrastination is delay, but not all delay is procrastination. So what makes procrastination happen? Procrastination is not a time management problem. It's an emotion regulation problem. So it goes like this, and we were there a second ago. You have this phone call coming in, and you have to make the decision, am I going to answer this? If at the moment you're involved in some other part of your task or your business, you might be building your business, and it could be something that you're really uncertain about, and you're feeling a little bit vulnerable about, or you're frustrated by it, or you pick your favorite negative emotion, because there are many, right? And if you're having any of those negative emotions, it's human to want to get rid of them. So what do? Well, this is procrastination. We avoid the task because the task is associated with the emotion. And in the short term, you win. But in the long term, that task hasn't gone away. And in fact, it's just getting uglier, because two things happen. You leave yourself less time to deal with it effectively, and a part of you looks at yourself and say, what am I doing? I said I was going to work on this business plan today, or whatever it might be, and here I am just fighting fires. And I wonder why I'm never getting ahead. It's an emotion regulation issue. And until you start to identify those emotions, and that's what you were doing with those, some of the activities in the book.
Yes, really great activities.
Identifying what emotions are associated with the task. Until you can start to come to terms with that, you won't realize, why is it I'm trying to avoid this? And yeah, so that's key. I mean, I'm glad we got that on the table, because it's not just a matter of this multitasking, but to understand why I shouldn't go and answering the phone. And part of it might be because you really are avoiding this, not making this happen. It's not as benevolent as you think. It's not that, well, I'm making sure this customer's happy. Yes, but at the same time, what you may be doing is just avoiding some part of your work life that you really don't want to engage in, but you desperately need to.
There's always those emotions underneath, right? We think we're in our professional hat. I was saying this when I arrived. We think we're in the professional hat, and like, okay, I'm in my professional pants, my professional hat, and then all of a sudden there's emotions that come up, because we're human.
Yes. Well, let's go back to this notion of being predictably irrational. If you think about the human amongst many species on Earth, we share a lot neurologically. There's what we call the reptilian brain, the oldest part of our brain, that is your limbic system, and it's highly emotional. It's the thing that keeps us alive, or does for most species. Fight or flight, you might know it as. And in there's a small part of the brain called the amygdala. It comes from the Greek word for almond, because it's a small almond-shaped part of the brain. And that's really the seat of fight or flight, but it's also the seat of when we're learning something, the amygdala is involved in learning in terms of laying emotions on that learning. Well, so my colleagues and I will often describe procrastination euphemistically as the amygdala hijack. That limbic system of your brain responding quickly to situation with fearfulness, the fear of failure, anxiety, frustration, boredom, and it just shuts things down. And it's the fight or flight. So what do we want to do? Well, we can't fight, so we fly.
Yeah.
And that's the avoidance of procrastination. So we really have to understand our emotional lives to get at this, what we think is a time management problem.
And it's really not.
No. And in fact, even mindfulness meditation has been shown to shrink the size of the amygdala, change the connections to the prefrontal cortex, where we're becoming more planful and more organized. So there are things that we can do to be able to gently bring our attention back. Because I said it's all about feelings, there's an irony here that when I listen to people talk about their tasks ahead of them, they'll say, well, I don't feel like it. I don't want to. If you're a parent, you hear that all too often, right? I don't feel like it. I don't want to. And I often joke with my children, it's not fun to live with Dr. Procrastination. I didn't ask you what you feel like or what you want to do. It's time to do this. And I'm trying to teach them a thing that many adults don't understand. You don't have to feel like it. And that's huge. And it's just a breakthrough point for many of us, realize, no, I don't have to feel like it. In fact, I'm never going to feel like that if I'm honest with myself. Now, we can believe we're going to feel more like it tomorrow. We call this affective forecasting, thinking about how we're going to feel tomorrow. And procrastinators are great at believing that tomorrow they're going to feel more like it. And we can see this in all sorts of other research. This is not new. This is that predictably irrational thing. But in the interest of time, I'll just say that it's really important for you to recognize that the moment you think, I don't feel like it, just know that you're stepping into the procrastination slide. You're about to just stop. And then you have to challenge that and say, do I have to feel like it? And what you might learn is that motivation follows action. And that there's nothing more powerful than making a little bit of progress on your goal. So for me, my number one tip for procrastination, and I use it every day because I'm not immune to it, right? I'm like every other human being. I don't want to, I don't feel like it. But I say to myself, what's the next action I need to take if I was going to do this, even though I don't want to? And I add that little piece just to keep me sane.
Yeah.
I'm not lying to myself. I know I don't want to do this. I'd rather stab my eyes out with a fork than do this. But what would be the next action? Well, I can take a practical example. I'm a professor, and I write letters of references for students. They're challenging to write because it's high stakes for the student. I can't just make motherhood statements. It's got to be grounded in things I know about the person. So I have to really work at both crafting it and bringing back stories about the student and their work. So it's easy to want to put it off. So I say to myself, what would be the next action? Well, I need to open the student's email and just see what they need. Oh, I can open the email. Right? Now I'm actually doing something. And then I'll say, well, what would be the next action if I was going to write this letter, but I don't want to write this letter? Well, you need to open a blank piece of letterhead and populate it to whom. I can do that. It's not that hard work that I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And what we always find is we make more of a boogeyman than we believe here. We're afraid of this, and once we get going at it, we realize, no, I'm actually pretty good at this.
Yeah.
That's why I do the job I do, just like it's why you do the job that you do. But in the abstract, we make it to be more awful than it is. And we've seen this in all sorts of studies where we put pagers on people, and when they finally get working on it, the task they've been avoiding wasn't nearly as difficult and stressful as they thought. Yeah. So really important point to put together with that earlier stuff on the fact that we need goals is that you don't have to feel like it though.
And I think I've had that happen to me personally. Well, I know I have more than once. And there was actually a meme that came through on my social media feed where it said, like, oh, I finally got that thing done in 10 minutes that I've been avoiding for 3 months or something like that.
It's beautiful. And there's so much of that out there, right? And I have on my bulletin board just behind you, it says, live now, procrastinate later. I love that one for the same reasons, right? Because many people will say to me, Tim, you've been studying this for over 20 years. Like, aren't you tired of it? I said, not really, because procrastination is deeply not getting on with life itself. And that these are your goals. Go back to your notion of goals. This is the business that you want to create. This is the life you're trying to make for yourself. You're actually putting off your own life. It's not trying to be uber productive for somebody else. It's that this is what you're trying to achieve. I'm always interested in why it is we become our own worst enemy and not living the life that we want. Yeah. Now, the thing is,
oh, here it comes.
You know, you're going to be, I think, you'll be motivated for change right now, right? Because if you're watching this, it's because you know, like every human being, yeah, there are times where I'm my own worst enemy. But change isn't easy. And there's always 2 steps forward and 1 step back, no matter when you make these changes and how you embrace them. And it's very interesting. A colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Wall at Carleton University, a few years ago, well, more than 10 now actually, said, let's do a study on forgiveness and procrastination. And I laughed and said, Michael, it's going to be forgive or forget. Like every procrastinator knows that. And he said, oh, don't be so sure. And I was so surprised at the results. In a nutshell, we found that those people who procrastinated and did poorly, but who forgave themselves, were less likely to procrastinate the next time. But those people who procrastinated and did poorly but didn't forgive themselves, procrastinated. I said, Michael, how do you make sense of that? He said, well, imagine that you and Jennifer had a transgression against one another. Like you didn't show up, right? You didn't show up or I didn't show up. What would be the motivation? Well, it would be avoidance. You know, we're angry with each other. We feel misunderstood. Yeah. Well, what would happen if one of you offered forgiveness? What would be the motivation? It would be approach. He said, well, with procrastination, the transgression is against the self. And so if you don't forgive yourself, then you just added one more layer of avoidance. And we just learned that procrastination is avoidance. So you have to be kind to yourself and recognize that, yeah, you know what? We're all human. I'm prone to the amygdala hijack. I'm prone to believing that tomorrow I'm going to feel more like it, that future self's some sort of superhuman. And instead, now I'm because I've forgiven myself, I take that layer of avoidance off and say, what's that next action again? And making a little bit of progress, you're going to realize just so powerful.
Well, that was very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was a really great place to sort of finish today's chat.
We could talk forever.
Oh my God. You'd be here all day.
We could. We really could. Because there's a million studies I'd love to tell you about. Because all the things that I'm trying to put in a nutshell, we have various pieces of the puzzle. and that's why I call that the book.
I'm going to take the book up again. And
solving the procrastination puzzle, because it puzzles us on the one hand, but it's also, I put together all the pieces of research that we have to date to say, this is our best guess. Science is always penultimate. There could be another study coming along, and some of my colleagues and I argue about some of these fundamentals, but I feel really on secure ground to say this is a self-regulation issue, not a time management issue. So I hope it's helpful to you all.
And from personal experience, it is a very, very helpful volume to look at. If they want to move past that, you have a website?
Yeah, procrastination.ca. You don't have to run out and buy a book. I have a blog that I started back in 2008, I think.
One of the original
podcast. Yeah, I was one of the first podcasters ever back in 2005, 2006. Now, you go and you'll hate some of those, because I know that podcasting has come so far that my early technology was abysmal. But the content is really powerful. And I interviewed all sorts of colleagues. So if you want to dive deep into this, be careful. It's a good way to procrastinate. But if you're going to take a break and do some of those things, you don't have to go buy a book. It's all freely available out there on the blog or on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You're sharing such important information, especially for us entrepreneurs. And I really love finishing off on that whole self-forgiveness train, because it's so easy to entrench ourselves in guilt over things that we haven't done.
Oh, yeah. And you're alone. Right? And you feel like there's nobody else like you, and you feel that the world is on your shoulders. In some ways, of course, it is. It is your imagination, it's your dream, it's your financing, and that just makes the avoidance so much more tenant. Like, I don't know if I can do this. Of course you don't, but that's what makes it sweet too.
So hopefully that inspires you. If you have anything you want to share about your journey with procrastination or delay, or both of them, or integration, or your own story of self-forgiveness, I'm hoping there's some of those out there already. You can feel free to leave some comments on that. And I encourage you to reach out, take a look at Tim's book, or go and check out his website, because there's just so much great information, but not too much. Don't get into it too much unless you've set aside that time for that specifically. Not like a crazy cat video vortex here.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. Nice to meet you as well.
Thanks for coming out to the farm.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I'd show you guys, but it's just gorgeous here today for February. Like for February.
Yeah,
it's great.
Amazing.
So I'm going to leave you as I always do. Be genuine, be consistent, be engaged. Thanks.
Bye for now.